Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the ConTinual Comics Lair for our discussion of our favorite comic book couples. The Comics Lair is sponsored by Heroes Aren't Hard to Find and Heroes Convention. I'm your host, Nancy Northcott. And we'll start by having the panelists introduce themselves briefly and tell us about when they got into comics and what sorts of comics they read. Gini, will you start?
Sure. I'm Gini Koch. I write the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series for Dog Books. I also write under a variety of other pen names and in all lengths and genres. And I've been into comic books probably since I could read, even though I wasn't allowed to have any but the Disney ones in the house. So I had to stand at the little turn cart reading hysterically while my mother and grandmother were shopping. So my initial was very fast reading, but I love comics.
John?
Hey, John L. French. I am a retired crime scene investigator, having done 35 plus years on the street of Baltimore. I'm now a writer. I write primarily crime, horror, paranormal investigation, and pulp. I started reading comics at a very early age. Read them up to maybe when I stopped reading when I got out of grammar school. And then I started reading comics again when I was in a used bookstore that also sold comics. And I picked up a copy of The Dark Knight Returns. And that was the slippery slope that led me to many decades of reading comics.
Fraser?
I'm Fraser Sherman. I write historical fantasy. I self-publish that and some nonfiction through my imprint, Behold the Book. And I also write film reference books. I read my first comic book when I was 6, Justice League of America 30. I am at heart more a DC fanboy than everything. I'm currently, a few years ago, I started rereading such Silver Age material as I could get. And I am now up to 1968, so that consumes a lot of my time. I read other things too.
And Robyn?
I am Robyn. I co-host an indie podcast called Diversity Issues. We talk about diversity in indie comics. So I didn't get into reading traditional floppies until I was an adult. We didn't have a comic book shop in my neighborhood. I was always into comic-related things like Batman the Animated Series, Disney Gargoyles, Thundercats, things like that. But I didn't get into floppies until I became an adult and had disposable income to buy them. But I did read the comic strips in the newspapers. I would always wait until my dad finished the Sunday paper and was like, "Are you done? Can I get the funnies?" So that was my first introduction to like comics. But yeah, the traditional floppies I didn't get into until I was older.
And I write historical fantasy for Falstaff Books. I also independently publish several different kinds of romance, and I write science fiction with my friend Jeannie Adams. I started reading comic books when I was 8, and ironically, it was an issue of Jimmy Olsen, and that's ironic because I came to loathe Jimmy Olsen. But he was my gateway into the world of superheroes. So I've always appreciated that about him. And I will say that the current incarnation of Jimmy Olsen is considerably less obnoxious, in my opinion, than the Silver Age version. But of course, your mileage may vary. So we're here tonight to talk about our favorite comic book couples. And we'll go around and have everybody mention one, and then we'll maybe do a little discussion, and then we'll roll on. So, John, will you start?
Okay. Well, when I mentioned to my wife that I was going to be talking about comic book couples, she said probably the most famous couple in the DC universe, which is Lois Lane and Clark Kent, or Lois Lane and Superman, or all three if you like. Yeah, they have to be one of the top favorites of any comic book. Any DC reader. You can find Lois and Clark, or Clark and Lois, however you want to put it, in just about any DC comic. Their relationship was very Silver Age traditional up until Clark proposed to Lois and she accepted, not knowing he was Superman. And then there was the usual break up, get together, break up, get together, until they finally got married. And except for the dark period known as the New 52, they have been married ever since. So if you want to know where to find them, just pick up a Superman book. Lois is in there. Lois has also had her own series in which Superman is allowed to guest star. But in general, if you find Superman, you'll find Lois.
Fraser?
Can I respond to something John said?
Sure.
I just wanted to say Jerry Siegel actually wrote a story in the early 40s where it introduced kryptonite like 7 years earlier than it happened, and where Lois learned Superman's identity, and they're like, this could be so great, us working together, partners. He also did a story in the Superman newspaper strip where they were married for 2 years, then it got retconned out. So, like John says, this goes back a long way. Okay, my pick will be a relatively obscure one because they didn't last. Ray Palmer, The Silver Age Atom, and Jean Loring. Jean is one of the more interesting women of the Silver Age. She is a lawyer, made it through law school in 2 years, wants them both established in their careers before they marry, which is why she keeps turning down his proposals. Talks at one point that she might even stay working if they have kids, which was relatively radical for the mid-60s. And they have a very warm, loving relationship. It's obvious, even though she keeps turning him down, that she loves him, and they are probably not spending time in twin beds. In one story, when he is completely exhausted and obviously incapable of taking her out on a good date, she just tells him, go home, sleep, we'll catch up and do this again, without freaking out like a number of the less well-written Silver Age girlfriends did. So I really like them. Then later, Gil Kane had them divorce, and Brad Meltzer drove her into an insane murderer, but that's comics on the bad days.
Okay. Robyn?
Sorry, I had to.
Yeah.
So my first one is from an indie comic, one of Brian K. Vaughan's. It's called Saga. So it is I call it science fantasy because it's science fiction, but there's also magic in the world. And the very high level simplification is that it's kind of like a retelling of Romeo and Juliet or West Side Story. They belong to two different races who are at war. He is a prisoner. She is his guard. They end up falling in love. And their respective governments decide this can't happen, because if people know that our two races can actually get along, there will be no more propaganda war machine. So their entire lives are spent trying to basically stay one step ahead of their respective governments who are tracking them down. But their story is their love and their relationship is very central to the story, but it is so much more than just the romance. It's a lot about politics. It's a lot about family. It's about struggles of being a married couple and parents under the stress of the situation that they're in, about their respective families when they find out that their partners are from the race that they're pretty much at war with. It's really well done, and the art by Fiona Staples is amazing. So it's outside of just the story of them together, it's a great sci-fi epic, I feel like.
And Jenny?
I have several, but I'm going to go with the one that actually I feel is like, it's not new, but it's one of the newer pairings for comics that always makes me just feel warm and fuzzy inside. I really like Batman and Wonder Woman as a couple. I don't know how much they do it in the actual comics, but they definitely played it up in Justice League Unlimited and Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, the animated series. And I loved it. I love the idea of Batman and Wonder Woman together. I think they make a really good couple. I know there are a lot of people that like Superman and Wonder Woman, and I'm just like, go to another planet, man, right? It just doesn't feel right. I guess I'm the lowest purist, but I really like the idea of Batman and Wonder Woman. It's much more, and they did it also in the movies. It's clearly there in the Snyderverse that's kind of, get over Steve, the dead guy, and I'm right here, right? But I really like it. They're more equal, I feel, than a lot of other couples. And while Catwoman's great, and I really love Catwoman, her with Batman, it just feels like, he's trying to redeem the bad girl with his marvelousness. And I don't know that I buy it, right? But Wonder Woman's a good girl. And I just really like that pairing. Just always gives me warm fuzzies.
Yeah.
Did you see them?
If I may, there was a Justice League story arc a long time ago called the Obsidian Age.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the main team had to go back in time. Before they did this, Batman plants a good one on Wonder Woman.
Hmm.
And when it was over,
Mm-hmm.
in both Wonder Woman and the Batman books, they were exploring, the characters were exploring the possibility of a relationship. Alfred gave it a thumbs up.
Right?
He was real happy. But in the end, I think they decided that they were just going, or at least the editors decided they were just going to be friends. But I agree with Ginny that Batman and Wonder Woman would make the perfect couple because they're as she said, they're equals. They both have their own jobs. So and there's no redemption. He doesn't have to worry about if she's going to steal the Wayne family jewels.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have to worry about locking her up. That sort of and then there's that golden lasso that'll maintain honesty in a relationship.
Well, there was a few years ago, and I was just playing around with the web browser to see if I could pin it down. There was a 6-issue miniseries of Batman and Wonder Woman on another world, kind of replacing the guardian of that world so that he could have a break. And it's looking like it might have been a Brave and the Bold miniseries.
Yeah, there was. I forget what it was, but yeah.
It was called, it was A Brave and the Bold. I'm seeing the cover on one of the websites. My favorite couple is somewhat more obscure. I fell in love with the pairing of Saturn Girl and Lightning Lad when I was 9. And it was, my little girl heart just fell at their feet because Saturn Girl had seen a message from the seers of Naltor, whose predictions always come true, saying that Zaryan the Conqueror was on the way to try to conquer Earth and that a legionnaire would die in battle against Zaryan. So in the next Legion election, she rigged it so that she won, and then she found sometimes very flimsy excuses to kick the rest of the legionnaires out. And then when Zaryan came, she went off to face him alone. But then Mon-El, who is not at all like the character on the Supergirl series, except wardrobe-wise, they're kind of similar, who was exiled to the Phantom Zone, communicated with Lightning Lad and told him what had happened. And he went off after her. And the ray from Zaryan's ship hit him and not her. And so they go back to Earth together, and Saturn Girl is saying something to the effect that I wanted to, it should have been me. I was ready to die. And Cosmic Boy says, well, he felt the same way about you. And that was it for me. Done and dusted, favorite couple, always and forever. And they're in the Legion of Superheroes when there is a Legion of Superheroes book. Luckily, there have been enough Legion of Superheroes books that if you look at archives or at collections, you can find a fair number of adventures. And usually they are together. Every once in a while, somebody plays around with that, but usually those two are together. And they are my favorite couple since I was way young. And so I'm now set in my ways and unlikely to change. But But does anybody want to pick up on anything that anybody else said about any of the other couples?
I mean, I agree with what you said about Lightning Lad and Saturn Girl. Although I don't know if I'd be brave enough to have a relationship with anyone who could read my mind. But and again, the Atom and what was her name?
Jean Loring.
Yeah, and I think it was just that whole mini series where she turned into a crazed killer and later became Eclipso.
Yes.
I mean, that was just a disaster from the beginning.
Yes, in the series Identity Crisis, it is extremely stupid in a lot more ways than I could go into here, and it would also thread Jack us off topic, but it was not good.
Yeah.
Hey, Len, welcome. Let us
Hey,
finish
Len.
this round, and then I'll come back to you. I'm glad you could make it. Robyn, what did you want to say?
I was just gonna pick up on comment on what Ginny was saying. Actually, kind of Ginny and Fraser, because they both mentioned the Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman Trinity. I do love that they're like really close friends, but personality wise, I feel like if Bruce was gonna be in like a stable relationship, that it would be with Clark, because partly I feel like, because like to your point, I feel like Catwoman's got to be able to do her own thing. He's never really going to trust her. She's got, you know what I mean? She's, even when she's like doing good, she's still going to do bad sometimes. And Bruce has such a distrustful nature. I kind of feel like Wonder Woman would just get tired of his mess. You know what I mean? And he just puts people through too much. And I feel like Clark is like the only one who can put up with his mess. And then two, he's so pure-hearted that like he's one of the few people that Bruce actually just trusts outside of the Doom storyline where he just screws over everybody.
Here's where I argue. I don't think Bruce doesn't trust anybody. Okay. He is holding kryptonite for the inevitable day when
that's why I said outside of the Doom storyline.
No,
but
he
if
keeps
he's
it in his
anybody, I feel like it's gonna be Clark.
Yeah, but well, I don't know romantically. I mean, that's what best friends are. Your person. That's your best friend person. I don't know romantically. That depends on how everybody wants to spin it. So far, most of the source material has spun that very straight. But that's not to say that other people don't. Okay.
Yeah.
That is true. There's a lot of shipping out there.
Of Clark is really, to me, that's his best friend. And that is actual canon. Clark is his best friend. It's the only person who fully gets him, and vice versa.
Yeah, but
there's
a
also
lot of married couples
stuff.
say that they married their best friend. So it's not like out of the realm of possibility for them to be like.
Oh yeah, no. It depends on your AU.
Yeah.
And
I will say, go ahead, John.
If you want characters who are basically Superman and Batman in a romantic relationship, there is Apollo and Midnighter, who I forget where they started out, but they are characters now in the DC universe. Authority, thank you. And so they are definitely a couple. They got married. I think they adopted a kid, and they have broken up and gotten back together. And during one of their breakups, Midnighter wound up working with Nightwing and getting a massive crush on him.
Yeah.
I will say Alan Brennett, who does mostly non-comics writing, but has written a few really good comic stories. He did A Brave and the Bold about how the Earth 2 Batman and Catwoman wound up married. And it does such a good job of Bruce realizing Dick is going off to live his own life. Commissioner Gordon's retiring. Alfred's retiring. He's been playing the shallow playboy so long, there's almost nobody in his life who really knows him. Then the Scarecrow's fear gas inflicts him with his worst fear, which is everyone leaving him, just like his parents did. And he doesn't know that it's not true. And he finally figures he thinks somebody's actually erasing these people. But the one person they will never think of him turning to is the then reformed Selena Kyle. So he goes to her for help. I cry a lot because it's a really moving story. And she breaks the spell and he realizes he loves her, and it's really good.
Yeah.
There's a collection of Alan Brenner stories in trade paperback. It's worth getting. Several of them make me snivel.
Okay. Well, that's a high recommendation. Len Berry has joined us. Len, will you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you got into comics, and then who your favorite comic book couple is?
I am a giant fan of the X-Men, so that's going to answer some of the question here in a minute. So much so that I'm influenced to write dark fantasy. I'm influenced to write science fiction, but my characters end up having that X-Men style banter. I got hooked in by the 90s cartoon, but I'd also already had some comics here and there over years before then. And then I started steadily reading, and Gini will cringe when I say Scott and Jean forever.
Well, I'm a Scott and Jean forever too. But
well, no, Len knows that I'm not, and
I know that you're not. That's why. That's
well,
why
what's really funny, way back when our daughter was really little, we were going to go, as we talked about going, because she was we were watching the TV show, right? And she wants to be Jubilee, right? And I will be Jean Grey because my hair was red. I will be Jean Grey. I'm like, great, Daddy can be Wolverine. No, Daddy has to be Cyclops. And I'm like, but Mommy doesn't want to have sex with Cyclops. And we just see, this was just like, maybe we change. He's like, boy, talk about typecasting, right? I'm like, well, you really kind of are the Boy Scout, but I prefer you when you're being Wolverine. So no, I do appreciate, but people are allowed to love Scott and Jean. I'm just allowed to quietly say I really like Age of Apocalypse.
Well, you know, we've had such a interested discussion that we've actually blown through half of our time that we've been talking about this. So instead of doing another round of favorite couples, let's shift to talking about how the comics handle couples. What do you think is good? What do you think is not? You can mention other couples if there's a couple that's your unfavorite, which I know someone on the panel has at least one unfavorite. Feel free to toss that in. But let's see, Fraser.
I think the biggest problem is that comics is if they're successful, they run for a long time. And inevitably, a lot of the times, even if you have a great relationship, some writer looks at it and says, well, screw this. I want to write something fresh, or I don't like this relationship. Case in point, Jean Loring. Gil Kane wanted to write the Atom as a kind of sword and sorcery hero in a lost city in the Amazon. So he gives them a big fight and they divorce. Howell Ferris and Hal Jordan have gone so many insane ways, back and forth. Mary Jane and Peter Parker are married for 10, 15 years. Editor decides, no, Peter should be young and single again. So, poof, marriage goes away. I could have forgiven it, maybe, if it was a better story. Also, hi, honey, I love you, but my mother figure is dying, so I'm going to choose her over our marriage. Would piss me off royally if my wife had ever said anything like that to me. Mm-hmm. So I have problems with that whole freaking thing.
That story, I was just screaming at. I'm like, Aunt May's response to this is, Peter, let me die.
Yes.
Right? And Peter, stay with your wife, who I happen to love. Plus, in what world do you and your spouse not go to care for the sick parent or bring that sick parent into your house? Okay. Oh, I'm sure there are people who don't. Okay. But wouldn't it be nice for the comics to show that the good example is if you love this person, you both go help. I have to leave you because my somebody else is in trouble. Yes. And you couldn't possibly understand. Yeah. I just want to hit people.
So somebody actually came up with a fanfic variation on that I thought would work, which is that Mephisto goes to, instead of pitching, I will save your Aunt May, you lose your marriage. He goes to Mary Jane and says, hi, I will save him. In return, you will go back in time and save Gwen Stacy. He will love her. He will never be with you. Are you willing to do that? And then in the final scene, he's staring as she walks into the past because she's going to do that. And that had a little more quality
It's
to
a
it.
little more
Yeah.
plausible, but it
Yes.
just
I mean,
yeah,
I'd
that
still
much more
see them
involved.
together, but
Yeah.
Okay, Robyn, what about you?
You're on mute.
You're muted.
I'm sorry, can you repeat? Because you're asking us
Now, what
breakup.
are your thoughts about the way the comics handle couples?
Well, that's a little tough one because since I read mostly indie comics, I feel like they're not beholden to existing canon and existing storyline. So I get what you guys are saying, and I understand a lot of the dust up and shake up. But I feel like I don't have as much of a dog in this fight because generally for the comics I read, it's like one creator from beginning to end. So they've had like a full vision for their couples throughout that. I'm trying to think of one where
Like you say, that's a huge selling point for indie comics. I think you are
Yes.
that really
I will drink to that.
right? Oh, you wait. So all the titles you're suggesting, I don't have to worry that somebody's gonna I'm gonna be really happy with this couple and then they're gonna destroy it. Sign me up.
Yeah. I did think the whole well, even though I kind of understood why she did it, I thought the whole thing, the lead up to Bruce and Selena getting married, I think it was maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, and then she like walks away from him at the altar. That's another one where I feel like with big two stories, sometimes it's more about the hype around certain events and things like that. And I just thought it was kind of putting the fans through the ringer for, I can't even completely say what reason, but yeah, unfortunately, I don't have as much of a dog in this fight.
But that's in a way, as I think Jenny said, a real selling point for indie comics because it's not like, well, we need to do something to shake something up. How can we do that? Oh, I know. We'll break up this long established couple and kill one of them. And it's like, a friend of mine stopped reading Spider-Man over that marriage, and he'd been reading Spider-Man since he was 8 or 9 years old. And it really upset him. And one thing that's interesting to me about the way comics treat couples is they don't highlight the slice of life moments. And a superhero comic book is not about slice of life. It's about action and conflict and adventure.
Mm-hmm.
But there's room in there now and again for a little bit of slice of life. And like Robyn was saying about the Batman Catwoman wedding, I was so mad when I read that comic book.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Selena's a weenie and she's never been a weenie, and I don't like that. And I understand that Bruce is devastated, but I just thought it just did not make sense to me from the trajectory the characters had been on. And I feel like that a lot with these dramatic shake-up change things. Let's see, Jenny, did you want to weigh in?
Robyn has something else she wants to add.
Oh, I'm sorry, Robyn. I thought you were done.
No worries. It was just something new based off of what you mentioned about like the slice of life piece of superhero comics. So I agree 100%. I think one of the rare instances where it happened was, again, like we were talking at the beginning, sometimes where you have these one-off mini series where creators get to do new and interesting things, even with established characters. I really enjoyed Tom King's Mr. Miracle, partly for that reason, because even though there was action in it, the relationship between Scott and Barda, in those instances where it was like focusing on their relationship and their parenthood and things like that, it did feel more kind of slice of life, but also kind of about like his emotional distress and the PTSD from what he went through and all of that kind of stuff. So that was one of the few, I think, instances of where you did get to see kind of a slice of life, though it was still intermingled in that, but again, it wasn't like any kind of main canon. It was the one-off maxi series that Tom King did maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, it was a very good series.
Yeah.
Hated that series. And it kept the names no resemblance to any form of the characters that I will acknowledge. I realize I'm in a minority on that, but I hated it.
Well, people say that about Tom King's stories.
Yes.
The 7-issue that I can't remember the name of because I hated it so much, where Wally West killed everybody at the very beginning. That one.
Closing Crisis, I think it was.
Thank you. Yeah.
I never came close. I never wanted to.
Well, on that note, let's see what Ginny has to say.
I loathe, and I do mean loathe, the Scott and Madeline Pryor bit, because in the X-Men, apparently Jean Grey has to remain a virgin, which is ludicrous. And the only way Scott gets to have actual sex that results in children is with her clone. And it just flames to the side of my head every time. I mean, it's a good storyline if you stop acting like, oh, it's Jean, she's dead, but she's not dead, she's a clone. Oh, good, I can have, and we have children, and then then she has to die, so the real Jean, still virginal, can come back. I find that offensive, nauseating. I just hate everything about it. That is my least favorite. I have a lot of things I don't like in coupling. That's my least favorite because it's just obnoxious.
Chris Claremont's scripts, there is a running theme where whenever anyone is possessed by the dark side, they immediately start dressing like they were going to go to a leather bar and have randy sex with everyone in sight. It is
how
negative. You're only allowed to be sexually active if you are evil.
Okay, wait, Tom.
Sorry.
Fraser, you finish, and then Jenny.
It is I feel it's incredibly sex negative. It feels like the only reason anyone has sex is because they're extremely evil. I have actually worked on a story which is nowhere near finished, where people who get taken to the dark side hate sex because it makes them feel warm and affectionate towards people, and they can't stand it. But yeah, his books have issues. Sorry, Jeannie, go on.
No, I'm concurring. Emma Frost walking around in her leather teddy, and then Jean Grey when she's Dark Phoenix is also, and I'm like, and the men look ridiculous too. They look, but the women are clearly there for the men. It's just, yeah. I like the storylines. I don't like how he did any of that. It was all very, very, I think you're right, sex negative. You can only, and that's why Jean has to be this pure virgin, because, oh my goodness, only virgins are worthwhile. Madeline Pryor, she's a clone. She can have some kids. Right? It's just, it just makes, I could froth for hours on them.
Okay. Len, what about you? What do you think about the way comics handle couples?
Well, sometimes they get it right, but sometimes there's weird stuff like, so there's all this praise about Joss Whedon and his writing, especially post Buffy. But when we're going to pick on the X-Men more, it sounds like. So his Astonishing X-Men, he was supposed to be, it's going to be, it's a return to superhero form, and my light falls over, and it's a return to superhero form, and everything being traditionally, minded, but also progressive at the same time. And the way that he establishes the relationships in there works, but eventually he gets to a point where it's like, I'm going to prove how great of a leader that Cyclops is by having his, forgive the pejorative, his testicles in Emma Frost's purse.
Mm-hmm.
And every decision he makes is, dear, am I allowed to lead the team today? No, darling. And I'm like, ugh. Mm-hmm. It's like they're not even allowed to be people at that point. And that's, that's one of the reasons why I would prefer any day to see, Scott and Jean disagreeing on how to handle the Brood, to where they're kind of like giving each other the silent treatment for a few issues. That was interesting. And then they finally get to a point where they're reconciling about it and said, okay, we love each other. We disagree on this. We've got this to a point where it's working again. Maybe when there's an election for team members, both of us sit out and we go work on us for a while. I'm like, okay, as a lineup fan, I said no, but at the same time, there's also interesting other characters and couples who are running it, and it's like, okay, that works. You know, when I see something like the random Kitty Pryde ditches Colossus at the altar crap, I'm like,
the ditch at the altar.
That's like yuck. Now, what came from that is incredibly in character and has lasted, thankfully. The whole Rogue and Gambit are now married, because that's Gambit would do that.
Yeah.
Hey, we're crazy about each other. I steal rings. Want to get married now? Our friends are here.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because one panelist who was not able to be with us tonight isn't feeling well, and she said, you know, I really wanted to come talk about Rogue and Gambit. So I'll tell her that you plugged Rogue and Gambit for her.
I will. Hey, I have to live up for my friends, because Rogue and Gambit, you know, that's the thing I love about Rogue and Gambit is there is this wonderful nature of, you know, in the traditional mindset where Rogue's touch will kill you practically. Gambit's like, I'm ready. You ready, Cher? I mean, I'll kill over dead for a kiss.
One of the most romantic, tender moments, and I'm pretty sure it's from, I can't even remember now, it's from the comics or it's from the animated movie, but I think it's comics. Rogue basically tells Gambit that she cannot touch him and he should just go away, because, you know, she can't feel it. She'll kill him, right? And he goes away. They're sitting on the roof and he goes away, and you're just like, and she's just he comes back with a blanket and he puts it around her and puts his arm around her. It's just like, it's so romantic.
Yeah.
So they're a wonderful couple.
Well,
Yeah,
John, do you have, let's move on.
Okay.
We can come back to this. John, do you have thoughts on the way comics handles couples?
Well, it's mostly EC, and now they're getting into more stable couples, but they tend to forget the really good couples from the early days. I mean, Hawkman and the unfortunately named Hawkgirl were a married couple when there weren't that many married superhero couples. And they had a really good relationship, both as Carter and Shara and as Hawkman and Hawkgirl. My favorite couple, who haven't been around since the end of before the New 52, was Ralph and Sue Dibney. Yeah. They were the perfect couple. They were the Nick and Nora Charles of the DC universe. And then again, DC had to go and screw it up with this identity crisis. And then they even screwed it even more up with, forgive the grammar, with what happened in the weekly series 52. And then I just couldn't finish. Apparently, Ralph showed up in the New 52 Secret Six, and I didn't finish that. I love the idea. In the at the end of 52, they were reunited. They were both dead, and they were ghosts. And they were basically, they were still investigators, but they were ghosts, and they could do the dead man thing. And they made an appearance in the Batman comic. But anyway, I hate it when they forget that these people were couples, or for some reason they feel like it's necessary to, to bring them back, but have them antagonistic. So, it's just that a lot of times a love interest is used just to create tragic drama. I really feel sorry for either Tim Drake's boyfriend or Jonathan Kent's, the new one, not the boyfriend, because in the comic book logic, one or both of them are going to buy it.
Well, we actually have time to go around for like one more question. So we had 2 topics we wanted to discuss, and I don't think we're going to make it because our 2 topics that we wanted to discuss were unfavorite couples or couples that you would like to see shipped. And so why don't we go around and pick one or the other topic and say what you think about it? So
what were the 2 topics again? The ship and uncouples. Okay.
Unfavorite couples or a couple that you would like to see shipped. If you can do them quickly, you can do both. But we've been kind of taking our time and going into some depth here. So up to y'all. But Robyn, let's start with you.
No, can I
want to start with you? You want me to?
I can't think of one. Can I go last?
You can go last. And that means Gini will start with you.
Okay. I already did my unfavorite by discussing what was wrong. So my ship couple actually happens a lot, but it doesn't happen enough. I really like Nightwing and Barbara Gordon. I really do. And especially since they retconned her, so Oracle doesn't exist, Oracle's somebody else. I really like Nightwing and Batgirl together. I always wanted them together. Even in the TV show, I felt she was, she's a little too young for Batman 66. She was really more along Robin's lines. So that's the one. That's my favorite, and I want it to happen more than it ever does.
Well, actually, it's happening in Nightwing now.
Yeah, well, it happens, and then it goes away again. So I've stopped getting excited. That's my thing. I want it to last. I don't want it to be, and then we have an argument and have to go our separate ways till somebody wants to try to get Gini interested in our title again and throw that out and then go away. I want it to last. I want it to be a Lois and Clark, not a I'm leaving you at the altar.
Okay. Len, unfavorite couple or who would you like to see shipped?
At the risk of being ground that's been tread before, I'm going to go with Laura Wolverine and Sync, because the relationship that they've had developed over the past few years has been absolutely fascinating. The fact that the two of them spent hundreds of relative years together, found each other. He remembers. She did not get any of those memories because the version of her that had all those memories was still in the vault and has now popped out and is now dead. I would like to see that come through eventually because, the Talon, the older that had the memory, has since died. But I would like to see that happen because it worked together in a very, okay, we found each other in stress, but this is actually kind of healthy kind of way.
Okay. John, what about you?
Okay, this might be heretical, but my least favorite couple is Wonder Woman and Steve Trevor. He seems like he was just at it, because, she had to have a boyfriend to avoid certain assumptions about all those women on Paradise Island. So that kind of ended the talk. The same reason that DC created Batwoman, to keep the talk about, to settle the talk, all the talk about Batman and Robin. So that's my least favorite couple. And I don't know who you would pair her with, but DC, give Cassandra Cain a boyfriend or a girlfriend or somebody to care for. She's much too serious.
Okay. Fraser.
I will say there are times Steve Trevor is great, like one Golden Age story where he got superpowers greater than Wonder Woman's. She decided she could not deal with a man who was physically capable of dominating her, so he gives them up without a second thought, smashing the device that gave them, much to the horror of the bad guys who thought he would take her out of action. I'll go back. My least favorite, possibly of all time, although she's obscure, Lady Dormer. She is an Atlantean noblewoman. She is introduced in the Silver Age as in love with Submariner. When a horde of barbarians besieges Atlantis, she says, no, she's based, Nama, be careful. I love you so much. And he, because he's still crushing on Sue Storm, don't talk about love to me. And her feelings are so hurt. So she goes out and orders some of the defenses around so there is a clear path to take the city. And then she tells Atuma, I will show you how to get into the city. You must pinky swear not to hurt Nama because I love him. Of course I pinky swear. Spoiler, he's lying. And then she goes and gets the FF to rescue him. And she keeps doing this bizarre stuff where she will turn on Nama because he's not loving enough. And then she'll try to save him because she loves him. And it's like one of the worst written women characters I have seen. Plus, it is also emblematic, like Steve Trevor, where, and it's another problem with writing romance, where you let the love interest get away with shit that should, like in one story, Steve Trevor traps her in the magic lasso and says, now you have to obey me, so let's go to a justice of the peace and you'll say your marriage vows. And nevertheless, they're not going to end the relationship because they are the established love interest. And so you just ignore this shit and it is really annoying.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I finished. I didn't mean to cut you off.
That was it. Lady Dormer by far, but she is emblematic of a larger problem.
Okay.
She's also dead now. I don't miss her.
Yeah.
Robyn, have you come up with something?
Yes, and I may be treading into dangerous ground because this comic has a big fan base. My uncouple is from the Walking Dead comic. Michonne and Tyrese, the way they got together was so problematic, and the way Michonne as a character was written was so problematic, and I have so many issues with the way her character was written that is beyond the scope of this panel. But the thing that she does to bring that relationship about is incredibly questionable, and the representation and what it does, I feel like what it portrays is incredibly problematic, and I've had issues with that ever since I read it. I feel like the TV show has done a lot better with the Michonne character than the comic did, but yeah, the thing that brought that is definitely my uncouple. That it really burns me up the way that they came together.
And do you want to suggest a ship, or are you ready to move on?
Yeah, that's hard because, like, since I read in most indie comics, like the relationships are more well developed, so I can't think of a ship.
Okay. Well, when you stay with the same couple all the time, it does leave room to develop them a little better than we get in mainstream comics. I've been sitting here listening to the rest of you talk, and I haven't come up with an unfavorite couple. Nor do I have a ship, although I would be interested to see what could be done story-wise. There are a lot of fans who see overtones of attraction between Black Canary and Oracle. And I would be interested to see what could be done with that pairing in the hands of a writer who would pay attention to the actual characters' backgrounds and histories and attitudes, as opposed to just creating a story and plugging them into it. Is there any, we actually have just a little bit of time. Is there anything that anybody else wants to add? John.
Shout out to Martha and Jonathan Kent, one of the longest lasting couples in the DC universe. They raised one hell of a boy.
Yep.
Len, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I wanted to shout out a very interesting couple from Image in Saga. The early issues especially are following Marco and Elena, and they are fantastic together. They are the foundation on which Hazel's story is built. I mean, being their parents and all. It's a really interesting love on the run we don't want any part of this war. We're going to read crazy romance books dynamic.
Okay.
Can I give a shout out?
Sure.
Tom DeFalco's long-finished Spider-Girl series, which is set in an alternate universe where Peter and May are still married, MJ are still married. Their daughter Mayday is the new Spider-Girl, and they are great parents in an often awkward situation, and they are a really cool couple. And if you're frustrated with the fact that they are not a couple in the main world, this will help scratch the itch.
Okay. Yeah, Jenny.
For all the problems that the writers have heaped upon them here and there, I still think Reed Richards and Stu Storm have been the consistent couple for way longer than most of the couples we've named, other than Lois and Clark. So I really like that couple. I like they were allowed to have sex and have a kid. And all these other things. So yes, yeah. I just remember when the first one showed up, I was shocked out of my mind that somebody actually allowed that to happen, didn't kill Sue off and make a clone. So it was very exciting. But I really like them. They're a really good couple. They have problems, they fight, they make up, and they keep going. And I really like that. And they sometimes they fight about the family, which includes, Johnny and the Thing and everybody else. And sometimes they're just fighting because you do. So as they go, I feel like they were one of the more realistic representations of a married couple in the comics. They're not real, but I think they're closer than a lot of the others get.
Agreed.
Well, I think that wraps up that discussion, and we have time to go around and let everyone tell people where they can find information about you and your work. And if you want to highlight a recent, new, or upcoming release, this would be a good time to do that. Len, do you want to start?
Sure. You can find my website, len-berry.com. You can track me down on Instagram, on Blue Sky, on Twitter, whatever you want to call it now. I exist on Facebook. I exist in a lot of places. I'm getting closer to early in the summer having a new release out, Epic Science Fiction, Loyalty of Severus. There is a fantastic couple in it, and my editor was sending me responses about that just today.
Okay, John?
Okay, you can find me on Facebook, and you can get my books from Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, and my publisher's websites, eSpec, Bold Venture Press, and give me Patty. And Padwolf Publications. I've got a story in a collection from Padwolf called A Cry of Hounds. It is a steampunk anthology, which every story has a hound in it and some reference to Arthur Conan Doyle. My story is the case of the exploding airship, and it has about 24 Easter eggs, all reference to Arthur Conan Doyle and his.
Fraser.
I am Fraser Sherman. You can find me at frasersherman.com, Fraser, unusual spelling. I have lists of everything I've published there with links to buy it. You can also just go to Amazon. My most recent work published through my Behold the Book imprint is 19 Infinity. It's a historical fantasy short story collection. It has several with a romance element in it.
Okay. Robyn?
The website for my podcast, Diversity Issues, is diversityissues.libsyn.com.
And Jenny?
You can find me at GiniKoch.com. I'm all over Facebook. If you want to sign up for my free newsletter, hook me up. You can do so from my fan page, Hairspray and Rock and Roll. I'm on X, Twitter, Blue Sky, and Pinterest. Last month, I had a re-release of my romantic suspense novel set in and around New Orleans, Flush Life, which came out from Ginger Blue Publishing. And from when we're recording it tomorrow, my first Just Straight On mystery, co-written with Phoebe Bayless, is also coming out from Ginger Blue Publishing, and it's called Falls Girl. So pick it up.
You can find me here in the Comics Lair. You can also find me at nancynorthcott.com and on X as at Nancy Northcott, Blue Sky at Nancy North. I do have a Facebook page. I'm not there a lot. My next release is the first in a series of short stories tied into my Light Mage Wars paranormal romance series. They're called Between the Pages short stories because they are episodes that occurred in the story that was important to it, that were gosh, I can't even do subject verb agreement. Episodes that were important to particular characters in various books, but did not belong in the main storyline. And so I've taken those out and done short stories and kind of developed them further. And the first one takes place between chapters of Renegade Mage, and it's called Homecoming. And that'll be out April 18th. So thank you to everyone on the panel for joining this discussion. Thank you to everyone who's watching, and thank you to our sponsors, Heroes Aren't Hard to Find and Heroes Convention. For more information about them, visit heroesonline.com.